Hello, sisters.
Hello.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Bonjour, mes amis. Let's dive in. I'm going to start with you, Annette, and I'd like you to share some of what we discussed yesterday about what's happening in Hungary as it relates to women in politics and the real gender disparities that exist there and what you're doing about it.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real privilege to me to be here. So, as you've heard, I'm from a special country because, however, it's a member state of the European Union, but rights are seriously violated by several social groups, and especially women, LGBT people, Roma minority. So we are still having a huge task with working on equality, equal chances, and equal treatment. But you need to know something about my country. This government was firstly elected in 2010 by a 2/3 majority. They made a constitutional change in a direction of a hybrid system. I can name it as a half dictatorship, and I'm also from a country that was liberated in 1989 from a socialist dictatorship. So we should have really created a culture where citizens are able to fight for their own rights, where citizens are able to fight for different social groups that are suffering from violated rights. And this is definitely a skill that the Hungarian society or the majority of the society doesn't have. This is why I decided to, as a liberal politician, to focus on equal treatment and equal chances. So, and this is why we, as women in the Hungarian politics, have huge tasks to go further. So, for example, my country has signed the Istanbul Treaty, but we are still not keeping those rules. So women are just not violated in their rights, but also in the families, and so we have a huge task to do, but now we are standing here.
Perfect. And yesterday you were telling me that only 8% of the Hungarian parliament is women.
Yeah, 8% of the Hungarian governing parties and 12% of the Hungarian parliament. It means that we have more men with the name Leslie in the Hungarian parliament than women. So you can imagine the Hungarian opposition parties are doing a little bit better than the government parties, but still we don't have enough women in politics. And there's also a terrible situation with women politicians that they are mostly damaged because they are women and not because of a mistake or because of their opinion. So they are created as enemies just because they were not born as men. So I don't think that in a European country can happen something like this in 2018. And yeah, you can see now how things are going in my country.
So Astrid, I want to turn to you. We know that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. How do we then provide opportunity, training, resources to women to encourage them to run for office? And what is the party doing to support that effort?
Well, we faced a very practical case back in 2016. For those who are not French in the audience, we created En Marche, who ended up leading Emmanuel Macron to power. But you have to understand that at that time, we had no political infrastructure and no elected official at the French Parliament, and also at the European Parliament, by the way. But that meant that what we did, and we were committed to have a parity, gender equality in the officials that we wanted to send to the French Parliament. So what we did is that we had a very open and transparent process for applying. So any candidates was invited to send on a platform a CV, a letter of motivation, letter of references, and that was very open and very transparent. And there was actually a committee which was appointed to select those applications for interviews. And what was very interesting is that in the first 3 weeks, what we realized is that an overwhelming majority of applicants were men. So there's something here about something in our heads, something, and it's very consistent with Valérie Pécresse was talking about confidence. The fact that in the first few weeks you had only 15% of applicants, female applicants, out of the whole pipeline. So we had Emmanuel Macron, who was a candidate at that time, going on a video on YouTube, which had millions of viewers, calling for women candidates and calling for the end of this self-censorship and calling for women to lean in. Eventually, we had a majority at the elections of June 2017. Very proud of having 48% of elected officials being women and sent there, which actually contributed to increase the share of women in the overall parliament. Because in the last elections, there was a little more than 25% women at the National Assembly, and now we've reached 38%. But to increase that level of the number of applicants, we also had, in addition to provide training and mentoring for the women to apply and for the women to do a great campaign, because again, it's also about self-confidence and it's about getting there and getting it done. So we're very proud of that achievement of having changed the face of the National Assembly so that the national body is actually more representative of the society as it is.
That's very impressive. 38%.
Yeah, it's still not there, but we're getting there.
In the US, we just had our midterm elections, and we elected a record number of women to the House of Representatives, 100 and some. And that's really great, and it's the high watermark for us. But at the same time, we're still 100 of 435. So we are just 1/4. And obviously in the United States, we're 51% of the population, so we are still struggling with how you achieve parity in government. And so the training that your party has set up could be a model for many of us across the world and how you engage folks. And so Eleni, I want to turn to you around, part of the challenge, I think, is people who need representation the most are often not represented because they don't have opportunity, because of various other challenges. And one of those communities are young women, young people. How are you, the work that you're doing, addressing getting more young women engaged in the political process, getting them to run for office, to run campaigns? Talk to us about what Equal Voice is doing.
Equal Voice is a national organization, and I'm actually the treasurer of the national. And if you look in most of the parliaments, very few women are ministers of finance. So that's also a thing to remember. So you may have parity, but you may not have the women in the economic profiles where all the decisions are made or how the money is spent. So Equal Voice is a national organization. It's been 15 years in existence. We are all volunteers. We are all elected to the board, including the executive. And our mission is to elect more women in Canada at all 3 levels of government, the municipal, the provincial, and the federal. And I want to talk about our motto, because I think it's very important. It says, if you cannot be her, then support her in any way you can. And if you cannot support her, then celebrate her. So all of us have responsibility in this room, because we talk about rights that we have, but we also have a responsibility to help good men, also, feminists. I'd like to put it entre guillemets, comme on dit, des féministes, des hommes féministes. Et il y a eu plusieurs qui étaient ici pendant ce forum, mais en même temps, d'essayer d'aider des femmes. So, if we turn to the younger generation, we have done something very unique in Canada and the world. In 2017, it was the 100th anniversary of the right to vote for women in Canada, and it was also Canada's 150th birthday. So we took that, and on a piece of paper, actually, I have to say, over lunch, we decided we were going to do the Daughters of the Vote. The Daughters of the Vote was inviting young women between the ages of 18 and 23 to apply for a week of celebration, of inspirational speakers, motivation, and to sit in the House of Commons. 338 young women went through an application process. They had to tell us why they want to do this, what do they bring, and they had the incredible opportunity and privilege, as I did for 15 years, to sit in the House of Commons and debate the issues that would concern to them. And we debated all the issues. We debated sexual harassment. We debated racism. We debated healthcare. It was an amazing experience. I can tell you, even talking about it, Leah, my hair stands up on end, because it was one of the best experiences I had. And actually, that's why I then volunteered for Equal Voice, because it fitted very well with what I'm doing after having not left politics on my own, but that's politics. You have to accept that you're going to win and you're going to lose. And losing sometimes teaches you more things than winning in life. So we have now received funding, which we didn't have the first time, from the government. That's why I said it's important to be the treasurer. $3.8 million was given by the feminist government, and I'm going to say it, and a woman minister, a very young woman, exceptionally competent, and we'll talk about that later, Miriam Monsef, who believed in our project and gave us the money to do 2 more projects. So we've now put out applications in Canada for the 18 to 23-year-olds to apply to sit again in our new House of Commons, because we're renovating the old one, the old building. It was falling down. And they're going to sit there and get an opportunity of a lifetime. 1 week of activities, meeting all the politicians, talking to motivational women. But you know what my dream is, Leah? That in the G7 countries, maybe not in 2019, but maybe the following year, that each one of them will have a similar parliament of women, just to give a message out there that there are women who are interested in politics, that they're not apathetic, that they actually do want to contribute. And I have to say, women do enter politics. In my 50 years of doing politics, women choose to enter the political realm, not necessarily for the power, and of course, I apologize that I'm generalizing, because there are on both sides, but a lot of the men enter politics because of the power it gives them, and we know how that power can corrupt in certain ways. We've had cases in Canada of sexual harassment by politicians, but basically, women want to make a difference. And as Malala said, you have to be the one. You have to be the one for that change.
So let me ask you how...
Thank you.
We talked with Valerie about mentorship and having role models. And in your country, and I will ask you all the same, how important is the leadership of the country in terms of encouraging women and supporting women's ambitions, the political ambitions? Justin Trudeau has said that he identifies himself as a feminist.
Yes, yes, he did.
How does that impact, does that change? What does that do for women's hopes and ambitions and getting women involved in the political process?
I think it makes a huge difference.
On the other hand, we have Trump.
We won't compare.
There's no comparison.
No, there isn't. Although we're trying very hard, Canada, to work with Mr. Trump, especially on economic issues. But I think it made a huge difference.
Good luck.
I think Justin Trudeau can manage it, I'm pretty sure. And so can his cabinet. And you know his global affairs minister is a woman, Chrystia Freeland, and she was voted the best foreign minister in the world, well, in the G7, I'll say, for that matter. But all that said, having a prime minister who sets the tone, he may not get it all right, but the fact he started out with a parity government, and by the way, I want to talk about political party. Mr. Trudeau did not, I think he believed in it, to have a parity government. But guess where that resolution came from? The resolution to have a parity government came through the party system by the Women's Commission, of which I was the president in Quebec. So I'd like to take some credit for pushing the Prime Minister and others, he believed in it, to actually have a parity cabinet. And in Quebec, Mr. Jean Charest, who was the premier, had a parity government. So in fact, people who work within the party system can also affect. I'll give you another example. When I was asked to run, and by the way, I never thought of asking, which is one of the problems with women. They don't think of asking. I worked 25 years behind the scenes in provincial politics, and never once was I asked, and never once did I dare ask, which was wrong, absolutely wrong. And women are often not asked, the men are asked. But can I just say, in the party, we passed a resolution so we would have 30% women candidates. And that's how I ended up being asked by Jean Chrétien, who became the prime minister, to run. So it's important, the work we do.
And what are you seeing in France with Mr. Macron and in Hungary? What is the leadership of the country? How do they impact women's empowerment?
It's like in a company. I mean, the change starts from the top, and if you want to embrace, I'm actually coming. I have a business background, and if you want your company to have a social impact and embrace sustainability, diversity, the change and the example has to start from the CEO, be it a woman or a man, definitely. And it's the same with politics. What we did in 2016 and 2017 during the campaign is that very, very early on, the candidate Emmanuel Macron committed that gender equality would be the great cause of his mandate. And what was actually very interesting is that in the course of the summer of 2016, we went to a very vast door-to-door campaign, not to sell any agenda, but to listen to what the people had to tell us. And what was very interesting is that even before the Weinstein and the Me Too movement, we heard that women were so tired of this daily harassment in public transportation and this sort of daily hassle that they had to face in their daily lives. And this is actually why we decided that gender equality should be the national cause. And this is also why we committed that of all the candidates that would be elected in the French National Assembly endorsed by the République En Marche, half of them would be women. So it really starts from the top, and it starts after that with a very, very committed team of men and women targeted to that cause. And finally, I'm totally agreeing with Valérie Pécresse on the fact there is no such thing as women and men matters. That's very important as well, which is why I am very proud as well that we have a gender equality government, but that started back in 2000, and that we have in the sort of serious portfolios such as defense and justice, women in charge. That's very, very important.
I have a bad and a good news from Hungary. The good one is that the Hungarian Liberal Party has 100% women quota, as I'm the single member of the Hungarian Parliament who is sitting in the Parliament at the national level. So that's a great news. But yes, the very bad news is that the Hungarian government doesn't have a woman who would lead a ministry at this time in 2018. Wow. So there is no single woman who was held to be able to lead the ministry by our government, and the situation is worsening because, as I mentioned it, and I totally agree with Astrid, yeah, that's also a top-down process, but I'm trying to create a bottom-up process, creating months of rights awareness, because women, LGBT people, Roma people, disabled people should be aware that their rights are violated, that all women's rights are violated if there can be a government built up without a woman. So this is what basically our society should learn after the regime change, because it has been already 29 years, and there are societies all over the region where these thoughts arrived somehow. But in a Hungarian society, this government was in an easy position because these historical models were working really hard in the Hungarians' brains. So this is why we really should push this idea that we as citizens can do something for ourselves. We as women can work really hard for ourselves, can show with some good examples that mothers are also able to lead companies or lead ministries, as we have seen it several times in the world. So this is our task right now, and this is what the opposition politicians are working in Hungary right now.
So I want to return to the quote that you use for your organization, and if you cannot be her, then support her.
Yes.
And if you can't support her, then celebrate her. So I want to be a little bit controversial.
Go ahead.
What do you think about women who support candidates who do not seem to be advancing issues of women's empowerment? Do we as women have a responsibility to support women who are running for office?
Yes, we do.
Well, I was going to say I want to be just as controversial, okay? And say I'm not going to support any woman, but I'm going to support the right woman that represents my values, my principles, and is advancing. And if that happens also to be a man, yes, I'm going to support the man over the woman who is not representative of what I feel are my values and principles. So I'm going to be just as controversial. And I want to say about the firsts. You said that the United States, the number is not rising. But my God, the firsts in the United States, the first Muslim woman, the youngest woman, the first, tell me, Leah, I'm forgetting now. All these firsts are the beginning of a movement to change American politics. And where did that movement come from?
Hillary
From the
Clinton,
women.
yes.
Thank you. In the parties,
Yes.
both. From
Yes,
you and others who have led that fight.
Absolutely, and if I misspoke, the numbers are definitely rising, and we are thrilled to have
Yes.
120 some odd new women coming to Congress. It's fantastic.
And
We still
considering the
have-
climate.
Considering
at
the
this
climate,
moment.
but
Yeah.
I think it's all in the aftermath of women's movements around the world that we're seeing more women engage. But it always troubles me. For example, we just came through our midterm cycle, and there's a woman that ran for governor in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, who would have been the first African American to be governor,
Yes.
and yet 76% of white women voted for her opponent.
Yep.
76%.
So we have racism.
And it's,
we have,
so we have-
sexism. we have
And with
ageism.
Hillary, the same thing. 53% of
Yeah.
white women voted for Trump. So how do we understand what is happening in those instances? Is it simply a matter of issues? Or is there something deeper that's happening within women's communities?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what just have been said. It's not about the women, it's about the right women, or it's about the right person, advocating for the agenda and the values and the principles that you share. And just take the practical case of the 2017 election in France, where at the second round you had the choice between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen, a woman. Wow. So you see, so it's not because she's a woman that we're going to stand for her. I think that what happens in the US is refers probably to a more deeper issues. And you just mentioned that the voting behaviors between white and African American women are different, and I think that it also has to come to the race issue, which in the United States has been very divisive. We had hoped that Barack Obama had sort of been able to go beyond this sort of rainbow nation that we were admiring so much back in 2008 when he got elected. Well, we're not there yet. We're not there yet, and it's very sad. To me, it's truly, truly a mystery when I saw this Kavanaugh hearings, for example, that so many women were actually supportive of Kavanaugh when you had so much dignity of this woman standing in front of the Senate hearing and telling her story. This is a mystery. This is something that I just cannot understand. Women to women. I can understand that women cannot necessarily relate to other social issues. I mean, not everybody has to support, you know, something that I stand very much for, like abortion, which I feel is a fundamental right. But okay, everybody can have a different view on this. But I will stand for abortion. But this specific moment on Kavanaugh's hearing and women demonstrating and hailing at this very dignified woman telling her story, this is still a sort of philosophical mystery to me.
Yes, it's like the Hillary campaign.
Seriously, our responsibility to help women to get out from the situation that they have to prove 5 times more than men. This is the basic point, that women do still have much more chance to be interrupted in a meeting. However, they are a right person in the right position. They have skills for do their jobs, and they are still interrupted in a meeting. They are still broken down in the parliament because they are a woman. So this is what is the responsibility of us. To help women to get out from this situation, and because they have the power to build up themselves and to work for themselves if they get a chance. So this is all about equal treatment, and not about quotas, or not about getting women in positions, but giving or having the right person in the right position.
But I think quotas will move the needle, and I'm sorry, it's to even the playing field. I believe in quotas. I fought for it. Why? Because there needs to be systemic change in the institutions, which are parliaments. For example, younger women coming to parliament are always saying to me, how do I balance my family life with my professional life? If I have children, where are the children going to be if there's no daycare services or parental leave? So we have to change the institution. But before that institution, they move very slowly, institutions. And it's not just because men run them. But if we have quotas, I believe we may arrive in my lifetime to see actually an even playing field for women and men and parity all over the world. So that's my dream.
This sounds like the continuation of the New York Times debate.
Yes.
From yesterday. Well, I thank all of our panelists for your contributions, and for, Sophie, we need part 2. So we can drive to solutions. We thank you for your participation and for everything that you are doing to help move gender parity forward in your respective countries. And we look forward to the day when we are represented at our strength according to our numbers. So thank you, and thank you.